The family curse of the Kennedy clan promises its representatives death from terrible diseases and catastrophes. John Kennedy Jr., who always looked at life with optimism, was sure that his evil fate would bypass him. And after meeting the beautiful Caroline Bisset, he completely believed that he would live happily ever after. How wrong he was, and in your security, and in the woman you love. A couple of years ago, it became known that the main Hollywood supplier of series Ryan Murphy is working on the project American Love Story, the first season of which will be devoted to the difficult relationship of John Kennedy Jr. and Caroline Bisset. While everyone is wondering who will play the roles of the main characters, we suggest recalling the story of one of the most beautiful and discussed couples of the 90s, which tragically ended more than 20 years ago. I would like to say that if that tragedy with the plane had not happened, the heroes of our history would have lived happily ever after. This year, Kennedy Jr. would have turned 63, Caroline 57, and their marriage 27. I wonder how many children they would have had by this time. The daughters would probably have decided to follow in the footsteps of the model mom and compete with the Haddids, and the sons who inherited their father's beauty would have gone into acting. Alas, and but nothing like this was planned in the scenario of life. Fate was preparing a completely different, much less joyful path for the couple, because shortly before their death, their relationship was on the verge of a final break. It's all the fault of drugs, infidelity, and disappointed hopes. The first son of America, the main handsome man of the USA, and the potential president of the country, John Kennedy Jr., needed a decent match. It was written about almost on the front pages of all newspapers. There was no shortage of candidates, but for some reason they all had to do with the world of show business. Historians note, not without a smile, that John has it from his father. Charismatic and charming Kennedy Jr. met with Sarah Jessica Parker, Madonna, Daryl Hannah. In the list of his love victories, journalists even wrote the name of Princess Diana, and the Sun tabloid told in colors about the fantastic night of the British princess and the American handsome man at the Carlyle Hotel in New York, where John Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe secretly met at one time. The successes of the son of the 35th President of the United States on the personal front, the press loved to paint especially generously unfastening epithets from women's novels. A tireless, gentle, delightful lover. This definition was given to him by actress Daryl Hannah, with whom he had a short but stormy affair. However, even if Carolyn had not met on John's way, our hero's mother, Jacqueline Kennedy, would not have allowed his official romance with Daryl, Madonna, or Sarah. She would not have tolerated another Kennedy misalliance with Hollywood. The fateful meeting took place in the Calvin Klein boutique in New York, where Caroline Bisset was acting as a senior manager for working with VIP clients. A couple of years before that, she was walking the catwalk and trying her hand as a fashion columnist. Carolyn had a dazzling appearance, although not everyone would call her a beauty. Height 180 centimeters, weight 55 kilograms, shiny blonde hair, and irresistible, and very wide, smile and blue eyes. John Kennedy Jr. couldn't resist. Carolyn was, as they say, one of the simpletons. Her mother was a school administrator. Her father was a carpenter, and her stepfather was a doctor. Bisset's origin did not bother her future husband at all, but his mother would have been very worried if she had lived to meet them. Jacqueline died in May 1994, and soon 33-year-old John met 26-year-old Caroline. Their romance did not develop easily, as the chosen one turned out to have a very complex character. But John was ready to forgive his beloved woman absolutely everything. 2 years later, they got married, and Carolyn became a full-fledged hostess in John's 250-meter loft in New York's Tribeca neighborhood. On September 21, a ceremony was held on Cumberland Island in Georgia. The couple somehow managed to keep the event a secret from the paparazzi, so only 24 of the closest friends and relatives were present at the celebration. It all happened in a small wooden church, on the feet of which a single photograph was taken. In the frame, the newly made husband kisses the hand of his wife, dressed in the most beautiful wedding dress. This definition of Caroline's outfit was awarded not only from us, but also from many glossy publications, as well as from Meghan Markle, yes, she made her way here, who was inspired by him when she discussed her second wedding outfit with Stella McCartney. As for the author of Carolyn's outfit, it was the designer Narciso Rodriguez, whom she met at Calvin Klein, who was not yet known at that time. Everything was very laconic. Instead of fluffy skirts and beaded corsets, a simple combination made of pearl-colored silk, a careless bun, the bride's favorite hairstyle, minimal makeup, and a complete absence of any jewelry, and as an accessory, only transparent gloves. For the wedding, Caroline found herself in a completely new world for herself, and she didn't like him right away. Paparazzi, who did not forgive themselves for the missed wedding, besieged the brick 9-story house No. 20 in which the apartment of the newlyweds was located. The footage from those years shows how they surround the Kennedy couple, who gets into the car to go to dinner at their favorite restaurant, the Odeon, or for a jog in Central Park. John had been used to such unceremonious interference of the press in his personal life since childhood, and for Caroline it was all wild. As soon as the photographer approached her on the street, she immediately lowered her eyes and pulled her head into her shoulders. She will end up looking like the hunchback from Notre Dame, the former boss of Bisset, Calvin Klein, noted with sadness in his voice. The newly minted Madame Kennedy was terribly burdened by the fame that had fallen on her, and she could not think of anything better than to hide from all this. Carolyn quit her job and practically did not leave the house. She hated all the events to which they were invited daily, and where her husband loved to go. John had to beg her to keep him company every time, and how could she refuse, looking into his glowing brown eyes with happiness? And then there was the kiss he gave her every time. Besides, she soon figured out how to make fun of all this secular public. The modern glossy press describes with undisguised delight how for the first 6 months after the wedding, Caroline Bisset Kennedy deliberately attended all public events in the same black dress. The woman hoped that in this form she would bore the public, but such behavior only fueled interest, and soon they started talking about her as a new style icon. The press did not know at that time that in Kennedy Jr.'s huge apartment all his wife's things fit on one rail, under which there were boxes of shoes, and above it there was a shelf with jumpers. This revelation was later shared with journalists by former assistant Caroline Georgina. She also told them about the main fashion lesson received from Bisset. If you want to wear something bright, choose only expensive things. If you don't have much money, buy gray, blue, black, beige, and white. In the photos, John and Carolyn looked like an incredibly happy couple. Alas, it was just a picture. According to the memoirs of their friends, the quarrels of the spouses often turned into fights. She didn't like that he liked to hang out. He called her a bore. A year after the wedding, they often spent evenings apart. Did you immediately think that John was the cheater? Not at all. At least, that's what his numerous acquaintances say. But Carolyn, during one particularly heated exchange, told her husband that she was dating Michael Burden, the same mannequin with whom she had an affair while working at Calvin Klein. This Michael, after the death of Caroline and her husband, will write a book in which he will tell how Bisset often visited his little bachelor apartment. Once she even climbed up the fire escape and knocked out the window glass with her fist. Well, what is a stellar drama without drugs, antidepressants, and a psychotherapist? There was a place for all this in our history, too, and again in the chapter assigned to Caroline, locked up of her own free will in a huge apartment. She suffered from boredom and jealousy eating at her. Caroline was sure that her husband was cheating on her. The paranoia was intensified by pills prescribed by a familiar doctor and uninterrupted supplies of white powder. No matter how banal it may sound, but perhaps the situation could have been saved by the birth of heirs. Kennedy Jr. dreamed of it, but Bisset was sharply against it. According to her, the atmosphere of this famous family was completely unsuitable for raising children. As you may have guessed, she did not find a common language with any of her spouse's relatives. To this question, Carolyn's older sister Lauren categorically answered no. On July 15, 1999, she invited the Kennedy couple to a restaurant where she invited them to discuss the situation. What naivety! No psychotherapist from Manhattan had made any progress, But Lauren did not lose hope. Having read enough articles on this topic, she knew that the first step on the way to reconciliation of spouses is to invite them to join hands. I had to repeat the request several times before it was fulfilled. Her sister begged to make an exception and said that she would be happy to keep them company. That's how they parted, having agreed to meet at the airport. "It will be great," she said goodbye. It seemed that everything was against the company getting on the plane that day. Carolyn had terrible headaches in the morning. John had all meetings disrupted. Lauren was late at work and then got into a Friday traffic jam. In addition, the co-pilot, whom Kennedy Jr., who had injured his leg shortly before and was moving on crutches, wanted to take with him, was on vacation. Nevertheless, at 20:38, the private Piper Saratoga took off. It was already getting dark. That evening, clouds formed along the route of the aircraft, because of which, as many pilots noted, difficulties arose. Kennedy Jr. also faced them. Their bodies will be found only 5 days later. In another day they will be cremated, and their ashes will be scattered near the island of Martha's Vineyard, to which they flew on that fateful evening. If the flight had not taken place, John and Caroline's marriage would have inevitably come to an end. She would probably have gone to some rehabilitation clinic, and he might have resumed his relationship with Daryl Hannah, but as one of their closest friends noted, only this catastrophe allowed them to keep their vow made in the church to stay together until death separates them. The end of the story.